quality of a Fire Emblem map can be separated into 5 different factors. Flavor, how well the map matches the story and atmosphere that it is trying to portray, and whether or not it succeeds at making you feel like you're really experiencing the story as the developers intended. Objective, what the map is asking you to do in order to finish the chapter, be it seizing, routing, escaping, or defending. Is it offering you an objective that is interesting to work towards? Replayability, you finished the chapter, now how do you feel about it? Frustrated? Relieved? Satisfied? There's any number of possible outcomes that can occur after finishing a chapter, so consider whether or not you'd enjoy playing the chapter again on a subsequent playthrough. Difficulty. Difficulty might not be an important factor for everyone, but a fair amount of players yearn to be challenged by Fire Emblem, to be given a puzzle to solve with the resources provided. Was the map that you just finished difficult in a compelling way? Enjoyability. Plain and simple, is the map fun to play? Are you having a good time whilst playing it, and if so, are you able to articulate exactly why the map is so stimulating? When all of these variables are managed effectively, what you're left with is an incredibly satisfying chapter to play through, providing a memorable experience for the player that they'll hopefully be excited to enjoy again during a second playthrough. And if you don't pay attention to this formula, what you're given is some of the worst the series has to offer. My name's Blute. Welcome to F.O.R.D.E. And welcome back to another episode of F.O.R.D.E. My goodness, it's been far too long since our last one. And this time, we will be tackling a Radiant Dawn map. I forgot its number for a second. It's FE10! It's only my favorite game in the series. I can't believe it took us this long to get here. So thank you very much to the commenter who requested 312. A chapter that is kind of interesting to talk about. It's an interesting little blip on the radar. That's kind of demeaning and like condescending in a way. Whatever, we'll get into it as we go along. It's a chapter I rather enjoy, but it definitely has its fair share of faults. A lot of people like talk about how Part 3 is probably the best part in Radiant Dawn, and honestly, I kind of disagree, personally. I know I say me personally a lot, but I would genuinely say Part 1 is the strongest part in terms of just chapter quality. I think Part 3 is kind of a swing and a miss in a lot of areas. I think it's half and half on good to bad chapters. This is one of the good ones, though. I think all of the Dawn Brigade chapters in Part 3 are interesting. I think some of the Grail Merc chapters are kind of whatever, and the Crimean Knight chapters are booty butt cheeks. But I digress. Today we'll be talking about 312, which you would know if you solved my wacky anagram of Etch Perry, as Etch Perry will very quickly transform into the Price! Again, I would really love to get some longer chapter names, but that's just kind of the way the cookie crumbles right now, so. Yeah, 312 is an interesting chapter because, unlike 313, which is very much like the golden boy in a lot of people's view, 312 is kind of just, like I said, it's like a blip on the radar. It's like it's a chapter a lot of people are aware of, but it's like, oh yeah, 312, that's a chapter that kind of just happens. So I think it's kind of like interesting to talk about, an otherwise, maybe not forgotten chapter, but it doesn't get the praise that it might deserve, so to say. So let's just go ahead and dive on in. F for flavor. Flavor is, again, probably going to be the most difficult subject for this chapter, much like our previous episode. Like, the flavor for this chapter isn't bad. This isn't like Xander, where it's like, this is a flavor explosion, but it's an explosion in, like, the orphanage is exploding, rather than like, whoa, I've drunk this, like, Tango fucking Pepto-Bismol, and now my mouth is exploding in flavor. It's like Xander is an explosion where, oh my god, the children are on fire. Oh! Elise has been slashed down yet again. Whereas here it's like, ooh, this is pretty nice, but like, you could use some extra spices. I fully understand what the chapter is trying to do, and it's not like it doesn't succeed. At least somewhat. But it also feels like it's just... It feels like it's missing something overall, personally. I'm rambling a little. Let me just explain. I'm going off script, I'm going off topic. The general feeling that they want to resonate with the player during the Dawn Brigade chapters, in Part 3 specifically, is a feeling of weakness and hopelessness. While you're the Grail Mercenaries and the Crimean Army, you feel powerful. Like, your units just feel very, very strong, you have tons of options, you have tons of good units at your disposal, your army is bigger, and you feel very much in control, with the majority of maps being some form of seize, rout, or arrive. Like, when you're playing as the, quote, good guys, you very much feel like your superior army who is all about marching forward. The Dayan army, however, you genuinely feel weak, because It's no secret that the Dawn Brigade is filled with a bunch of really, really weak, like, almost timid children who just want to go home. And while there's only 3 maps for them in Part 3, with 3.7, 3.12, and 3.13, all of them are effectively some form of defend or survive chapter, making the player feel like the inferior force who's just doing what they can to survive. And that feeling is portrayed reasonably well in 3.12. Like, the story is effectively just Micaiah trying to buy as much time for Peleus as she possibly can, so that they can dispel the Blood Pact, which is kind of a mess in terms of writing quality, but that's a video for another day. We'll get there, don't worry. So the developer's goal was to make the players feel as though they're simply working on borrowed time, as Daeon's entire goal is just to stall the Crimean and Benyon forces for as long as possible. Which is definitely portrayed well, but it could be portrayed better. I'm complaining about what it isn't rather than what it is, but it's just a little glaring, like, there's a little bit of a blemish on this chapter. This is what I mean when I say the flavor is a little bit messy with this chapter, because the feeling is definitely there. But in my opinion, it honestly feels a little bit half-baked. Sure, I'm buying time in the sense that I'm holding the 2 choke points on the map, and the mood is definitely, like, down and dour and gloomy with the rain pouring down and the overwhelming numbers disadvantage. I'll also say this, it's kind of minor, but I do love that Radiant Dawn has unique little jingles for the player and enemy phases of just like or like depending on which army you're controlling. Sorry for like the preschool demonstration, but you get the idea. So the fact that it plays the very like heroic good guys theme, like it plays the Grail Mercenaries a bum 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 for the enemy phase theme, really sets the tone like excellently. It reinforces the idea that you're absolutely not playing as the good guys when you're with the Daeon army, which is wonderful. I love that. I'm really like showering this chapter with compliments, even though I'm like, ooh, its flavor is not that good, actually. Once you list all of these 7 reasons and ignore the 20 good reasons, this chapter's actually bad. Like, I'm showering it with all these nice things, but I do still feel like it's missing some spice. Like, it just feels like it needs something extra that would make the chapter really stand out, like really nice and prominent, like 3.13 does. Maybe the music could be a little more interesting? I don't know. I've talked about how music can really define the mood and atmosphere of a map, like how in Retreat, Broken Bonds sets the scene really, really nicely. But here, the music is just kind of there. Like, if you asked me which track was playing in the background right now, I wouldn't be able to tell you. Like, it's not a unique track for this chapter, which is fine, but, like, honestly, I genuinely couldn't tell you which track is playing. And there's a lot of really good tracks in Radiant Dawn. Like, there's Eternal Bond, there's Dawn Brigade, there's Dark Traveler. Like, it's not like Radiant Dawn has a bad soundtrack. It has fucking Ascent! Ascent is one of my favorite map themes. Like, there's tons of good map tracks in this game, but the one here is a little bit generic, so I'll probably just dot points for that. I feel like I'm airing and airing a lot here, so I'll just summarize with this. I feel like the chapter could have done more. Perhaps with less. This somewhat falls into other categories, but I feel like the map actually gives you a little too much, and you're too in control. I almost wish that Micaiah and Soth were absent for this chapter, as they both don't really do a whole lot, in my opinion. And I kind of wish Tauroneo was actually the Lord for 3.12, like he was the Force deployed unit. Like, we've had lords like Jeffrey and Brom and Nephany in the past, which is really, really cool. It's one of my favorite parts about Radiant Dawn, is how the Lord is constantly shifting. It's a shifting perspective between multiple characters. Like in Part 2, it's like, oh, Nephany and Brom are the Lord, now Lucia's the Lord, now Jeffrey's the Lord, now Lyncia's the Lord. Like, it's really cool. So having Tauroneo make his return to the Daeon army by having him be the Lord for this chapter would be a really, really, like, nice and smooth flavor win, so to say. I know flavor win is, like, kind of a weird term, but you understand. I don't know, I'm spitballing here. And we've been here a while. I feel like I've spent, like, 20 minutes on one category, so I'm just gonna try and move on. I'll say this chapter does succeed on flavor, but with a little asterisk that says room for improvement. Just gotta give Tauroneo his dues. This man does a lot of work in this chapter. He's like 50%, maybe 60% of the work. Moving on to objective. This chapter actually has a really cool objective. Defeating a certain number of enemies to clear the chapter as an almost halfway point between survive and rout is a really unique idea for a chapter. Even if we did already do it in 3.6, and arguably better there, but I digress. It's a genuinely interesting idea to almost make the player tally up how many turns the map is going to take, like, based on how many troops they're dealing with a turn on average, so to say. It really gives you that feeling of, okay, I'm taking out like 4 to 5 units a turn on player phase, and then I gotta factor in the enemy phase, and then I gotta factor in the yellow unit equation, and blah, 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 blah. And then it's just like, okay, just gotta hold out for another like 3 to 4 turns, and I'll be good. Like, it makes you think. It's cool. It might not have that much overall impact on the chapter, but it gets the player thinking, and that's really cool. Absolutely no complaints there. Main objective done really, really well, which is something I can't really say for the side objectives, as the map doesn't really have any. Again, I know this is kind of complaining about what this chapter isn't rather than what it is, but I couldn't help but notice on my most recent playthrough that the chapter wasn't really evolving that much. It's a very static map overall, and you'll likely just maintain the same 2 choke points for like 80 to 90% of the map, without any real reason to move your units further up. There's no chests, which is fine, but I feel like you could probably add some droppable items to units further into the canyon, maybe close to the Apostle's Carriage, to like actually incentivize the player to maybe play a little bit more aggressive. Perhaps they were just like afraid of the yellow units stealing your potential drops and just simplified the chapter to avoid frustration. I could definitely see the developers doing that. Moreover, there's also like a surprising lack of reinforcements, given that the chapter is supposed to feel like a desperate stand against a mightier force. There's very few reinforcements. Obviously, the opposing army dwarfs like the Daean army right from the get-go. They completely outnumber you. So maybe reinforcements would have been slightly overkill, but like aside from the 2 flyers in the top left from around turn 4-ish, there's not a whole lot of reinforcements to overwhelm the player, which both takes away from the flavor and the objective, so that's unfortunate. Much like the flavor, there's a lot of room for improvements with this category, and I kind of think the improvements already exist in the form of 313, as the chapters are very similar in terms of both flavor and objective. They're both like a final stand against an overwhelming power, but 313 just kind of does it better. So that's a little bit unfortunate. We'll delve into that more later. I got some ideas in my head. Either way, I'm gonna give objective. Again, this is like a success that is teetering on a fail. This chapter is getting like C+. It's good, it's a pass, but only just, so to say. Now on to replayability. Yet again, this is another mixed bag. The map is relatively simple in terms of variation. You're going to be attempting the same strategy basically every playthrough, but the one part of this chapter that makes it stand apart is its use of yellow units. I think yellow units are a really, really interesting idea, even if they're a little bit of a double-edged sword in a way. Obviously, you have no direct control over them, but you can still influence them, and any XP that they'd, quote, steal from you is turned into bonus XP. So you are actively encouraged to use them, which is, I think, cool. But at the same time, while yellow units can make the map interesting for people like myself, there are definitely others that will find that they make the game kind of just dull to play, as you're not really impacting a lot of factors on this map. Radiant Dawn is somewhat infamous for its, like, feature-length enemy phases, and the price falls victim to this in that around 60 to 70% of the chapter is going to be watching red units fight yellow units. As I'm pretty sure the enemy forces are programmed to prioritize fighting yellow units as opposed to your own units, just in case your characters aren't strong enough to hold their own at this point, which can make for a pretty uninteractive map overall. I think at the end of the day, replayability for this map kind of falls under opinion, honestly. Like, some people just like yellow units as a secondary force assisting your army, and other people will dislike them for basically turning the game into a cutscene, where you have virtually no impact on the flow of the chapter. I can definitely understand both sides of the coin here. I personally like yellow units, and I'm always interested to see what their AI is gonna do next, so I find that I always have fun replaying this chapter. But if someone were to disagree with this and find it completely boring and super uninteresting, I 100% understand. This one gets a pass for me, but if someone give it a fail, completely get it. This is teetering on the edge of a fail. This is very, very close to a maybe. All of the categories so far have been like it sort of passes, it showed up to the class, that's good enough. But thankfully, a much easier category to talk about is difficulty, which is something that I don't think it does very well. Plain and simple, I think the chapter is a bit too simplistic to really be that challenging in an otherwise pretty difficult game. Radiant Dawn isn't the hardest game in the series, but there's plenty of maps scattered throughout the parts that, even today, after numerous playthroughs, managed to give me some kind of trouble. However, 312, much like a lot of other chapters that we've discussed at this point, like A Guiding Wind and Princess of Bern, the map is very quickly solved by simply just blocking the choke points with your tanky units and calling it a day. The one on the left is basically already solved for you by Tauroneo and the boatload of yellow units already defending it before the map even begins, and while the one on the right requires a little bit more thought and effort to manage, it's really not that difficult to place 2 tanky units like a Nolan, or a Jill, or a Trained Zahak, or a tanky Soth. Like, you just place them in the optimal slots and you just kind of watch the enemy flail at your bulwarks. In fact, there's also like a bunch of tier 1 enemies cascaded among the stronger enemies, so it's not even like your weaker units are going to be completely useless either. Like, your Leonardos and your Micaiahs can still do some chip damage from behind the stronger units. The game is actually very generous in terms of enemy quality this time around. Now, you could definitely fall into the unfortunate position of not having efficiently trained your Dawn Brigade units up to this point. Meaning that, oh no! You don't have tanks for the right side of the map. Whatever will I do at this calamity? In this situation, you just lug Tauroneo all the way from his position on the left, and just slap him right there in the middle of like the carnage happening on the right. Or you just use the countless yellow units to guard the choke, specifically with the target command. Just pick a position you want them to hold. They won't like actively attack the enemy, but they'll certainly hold that point rather well. It's really not that difficult. I would love to give this category a pass, but again, much like Objective, I'd say 3.13 just does it a lot better, and that 3.13 is actually a tough chapter. This one definitely gets a fail. Now, our final category, Enjoyability. Enjoyability is somewhat interesting this time around, as, while I do repeat the sentiment of, if you enjoy yellow units as a mechanic, then you should enjoy this chapter, I think the chapter almost works quite nicely as a tutorial for 3.13. Now, I've been, like, glazing 3.13 pretty much from minute 1, but, like, the chapter is really, really good. I'd say it's like a top 3 chapter in the game. Like, it's really fucking strong. So, no duh, I'm gonna give it, like, boatloads of praise. And I've been talking about how 3.12 just kind of feels like a lesser version of 3.13, which could definitely be viewed as a bad thing, but I almost feel like it's the devs making sure the player is ready for 3.13 in a way. Like, they introduce you to yellow units, but they make it so you don't overly rely on them, which is great. They introduce you to the fact that you're going to be at a massive numbers disadvantage, which absolutely carries over to 3.13. Like, 3.12 just does a lot of small things that will turn into big things in 3.13, so to say, which I really, really like. I might be reading a bit too, like, deeply into it. Maybe I'm seeing stuff that isn't really there and I'm giving the devs too much credit. But, like, I do think 3.13 just works really nicely as a gateway into 3.13. Again, much like replayability, this one is very opinion-based, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it succeeds at enjoyability. Like, I do have fun playing this map. Is this Radiant Dawn bias? Probably, but there's also plenty of maps in Chapter 3, or Part 3 rather, that I do not enjoy. Like, the 2 chapters before, like, in fact, there's like a really big gap in the middle of Part 3 that I just actively despise. Like, 3.8 sucks, 3.9 sucks, 3.10 sucks. Like, those 3 chapters are fucking bad. And then 3.11 is the Great Bridge. No, I'm not going over the Great Bridge. We never will talk about it. And that will go ahead and wrap it up for this week's episode. You could definitely view 3.12 as a really simplistic map, and I absolutely did when I did my most recent playthrough. But I feel like the more you just delve into the intricacies of the chapter, like, there's little things here and there. Like, the flavor is quite nice in certain areas, and like, ooh, yellow units are a quite, like, reasonable mechanic, and it's like, oh, I'm having some nice, like, variation in the units I'm training. Like, it's good stuff. I feel like I'm batting for a chapter that isn't really pulling its weight that heavily, so to say. Like, maybe I'm buffing it up a bit much, but I do genuinely think it's a great chapter that really effectively represents Daemon's struggle against a mightier force. Can you tell that I'm biased towards the Daemon chapters in Radiant Dawn? Is it that obvious? As for our anagram, the next chapter is a return to another Gaiden chapter. As a little hint, since our anagram is a little bit out there this time. But either way, this week's anagram is none other than, listen closely, Ardent Photo Fob. For those in the back. Ardent Photo Fob. Okay, that's gonna do me for this week, everyone. Hope you enjoyed as usual. I will see you next week. Oh, this was a bad stretch. Oh, I'm stuck, my bones. Oh god, help. I'm gonna be stuck in this fucking, like, A pose until next week. Send help. My address is 123 Please Send Help Boulevard. Anyway, I'll catch you next week, guys, everyone. Bye!